G'day mate, welcome to Factorio with me, JD. Today we're doing an introduction to Factorio. Now this is explicitly aimed at brand new players to the game Factorio, but I will make sure I have some golden nuggets of information for those more experienced players out there. And today we're covering really the main menu. We're covering the different options in the main menu. We're really going to step through the settings menu and what a lot of those settings do, along with mods themselves. So with that, we're going to roll the intro, get on with the video. With that out of the way, let's just jump to it. So we obviously, in my case, have a continue button. This continues your last single player game. If you happen to be playing a multiplayer game on a server, it won't automatically connect you back to that server. So just something to keep in mind. We have single player with a new game and a load game. I'm actually going to cover map generation in a separate video. You'll probably find it linked down in the description below as probably a playlist continuing from this episode forth, along with a second playlist of other tips and tricks videos that I've actually done in the past. If you're new to Factorio, I really recommend you giving probably both of them a good watch. So we have multiplayer, we have host new game, host save game, which is, pretty much the same, setting up a brand new game and then hosting it. Actually, we might just jump through that. So you can set it up for public, Steam, if you want to have Steam access, so people can join directly from Steam, LAN access as well, maximum upload speed and upload slots, so how many people can join at the same time and what's the total amount of bandwidth you're going to give each player as they join, your password, the autosave intervals, so how often you want that particular game to save, whether you want to kick people when they're AFK for too long, enabling commands, again, same story, whether you want to be able to put commands into Factorio to do some administration things, like a lot of them will actually disable achievements, so something to keep in mind. Normally that's defaulted to admins only. Whitelist, banlist, admins only, they're sort of things that you'd set up for a dedicated server. Non-blocking save is something that only works with Linux and Mac OS. And verify user identity just checks with Factorio.com to make sure they actually have a legitimate copy of Factorio. I normally recommend that you leave that on just to avoid griefers, honestly. So that pretty much jumps through hosting new game, hosting save game is pretty much the same process. Browsing public games, when we click this, we do get a list from the Factorio servers of all current games that are available with my search parameters. So I've got, yes, I want to have players, passwords, yes or no, has mods, yes or no, Steam friends in-game, any yes or no. So there's a couple of choices there. On top of that, you can actually search. I normally run a community server every single month. I'm actually running one. Well, I'm running one pretty much every month. You can always search for JD and see if it pops up. Unfortunately, it looks like I'm not running one on this current version of Factorio. Normally, it's on the very latest version of Factorio. There are a couple of exceptions. We normally take a couple of days to update. I think it's actually currently on the previous version of Factorio. Anyway, we also have browse LAN games. So if you happen to have a friend playing locally, you can click on this and obviously join them over the local network rather than going off to the internet. Finally, have a connect to an address. So this is for any servers that aren't publicly listed on the Factorio public games. You do have a couple of servers that are listed privately, at which point you can just type in their IP address and connection details and connect that way. Going through map editor, I'm not going to cover the map editor at all. Honestly, it's a very, very powerful tool, but it takes a lot of time to go through and tweak a really, really good map. Factorio map generation, the random map generation is very, very effective. There are a lot of custom scenarios that you may find on the internet, and there are a couple of groups that run custom scenarios. Again, same story. They spend a lot of time in the map editor to create some very, very good maps, but outside the scope of this particular video. Settings are actually, first off, we're going to go to mods. So mods lets you manage the current mods you have installed. As you can see, I do have a very extensive list of mods currently installed. On top of that, you can actually click on the install button and add mods direct from the Factorio mod portal straight into your game. So if I was looking for, I don't know, Factorio extended, there we go. I can search by the mods, click the one I want, click install, and it'll automatically download. I don't really want it to download right now because that'd force me to update, restart my Factorio. On top of that, you can also go over here and automatically update any mods you currently have installed. So again, very, very self-explanatory. You do have a lot of hyperlinks in here you can click on to get more information, along with what other mods that one might require. So we can see that Factorio Extended Trains requires Factorio Extended Core to be installed. If I click on that, it'll take me to that mod where I can read more information. So that covers the mods page. About pretty boring, pretty self-explanatory. And finally, we have the settings menu. Now, settings menu has a lot of detail in it, and there's a lot of things in here you can do to improve your gameplay or change the way the game looks. So what I'm actually going to do is drag this over here so Editor JD can use the right-hand side. Thanks, game. I'm going to cover these fairly quickly, fairly briefly. Look, if I don't cover it, there is a lot of little information tags on here. So if I don't cover it and you're having problems with your computer running Factorio, because believe it or not, for even how the game looks, it is a fairly graphic intensive game. So as is the graphics menu, I'm going to be covering some of the things in here, not all the things. As it, if I don't cover it, check the little information tag. At the same time, if it has this little circle thing here, it means it requires a restart to the actual game to change that setting on and off. So with that out of the way, we're going to have Editor GD go and put some examples over on the right hand side. So full screen VSync, fairly self-explanatory. We have show all smoke. Again, this is one that you can turn off if you're having an issue with your game and the performance of the game. So Factorio is one of those games that is really, really well known for being able to run on a potato, but it does require a potato with a graphics card. You might be one of these people that has a graphics card that's a little bit lackluster when it comes to Factorio. You can come in here and, as I said, turn off some of these settings to hopefully improve your game performance. Most people, if you have a dedicated graphics card of any type, in the last 3 years, you're probably going to be fine. You probably don't have to worry about too many of these settings. So, as I said, smoke, again, the Editor JD puts up some examples. I've actually turned these off in a lot of my games to make it a little bit easier to see what's happening in the factory, because sometimes the smoke is a little bit too much. But again, it's entirely up to you. You can turn it off to, increase the performance of your game. Showing clouds, the Editor JD can find a good example to put on the right hand side here. Clouds is, you don't actually see the clouds, you see the shadows on the ground. You'll find most YouTubers, Twitch streamers, those sorts of people actually turn this setting off, and you really can't even notice. The only reason we turn the setting off is it means that we're not re-rendering every pixel on our videos every single frame, because there's no shadows moving on the ground, because that's really what the clouds are. The decoratives, hit and miss. You can turn them on or off. You're probably not going to miss a lot to the game. They do add a little bit of ambience, but it's honestly fine to turn off if you need to. Particles are a little bit hard to demonstrate, but we're hopefully Editor JD finds a nice clip he can put up on the right hand side. They're things like blood effects, flamethrower effects, that sort of stuff. Item shadows and inserter shadows, they're again a fairly easy one. Firstly, I normally turn off if I'm having any sort of graphics problems. Same with the show animated water and the show animated trees. Again, unless you're really, really looking for it, you're probably not going to notice it. So something you can probably turn off. Minimize on focus loss. This is probably an important one if you decide to accidentally play Factorio at work, because it's not like we all have an addiction to this game, and it's not like, some people haven't been known to play it at work. So this is one that if you minimize Factorio or tab out of it, sometimes it does not always disappear down to the taskbar. So this just makes sure it does. These are fairly self-explanatory. If you're not sure, just hover your mouse over them. Same with the video memory, the Atlas texture size, the texture compression. We will cover some more advanced settings on those later on in the video, along with brightness, contrast, saturation, all those sorts of things. There is one here, the lights render resolution. So you can turn the quality of the lights down that only affect nighttime, and it makes a massive difference on performance. Again, like I said, if you have a machine that has a dedicated graphics card, anytime lasts like 3 years, even I'd probably go as far as a laptop within the last 2 years, you're probably going to be fine for a lot of these settings. Anyway, on to controls. So controls, I'm not going to cover it all. The only thing I will cover very, very quickly is advanced interaction drag map. I'll actually show a demonstration on this on the right hand side. Later on in the game, when you get artillery wagons and you can start firing artillery at the biters, if you wish to carpet bomb an area, you need to remove dragging the map being the left mouse button. I normally change this to the middle mouse button. Just a little bit of a different mouse control, but it means that now you can actually carpet bomb the biters. And again, there's a lovely demonstration video on the right hand side done by editor JD. There's another thing with Factorio. Anytime you make a change, if you're not sure, so if you click back, you can discard the change, click back, change other things. The other thing you have up here is you can click a reset to default and actually highlight whatever options that you have been playing with back to their default settings. Sounds, again, fairly self-explanatory. You can see I've actually turned my music volume down because it can be a little bit overbearing when playing Factorio, especially with me trying to talk over the top. But apart from that, look, Factorio sounds are pretty much spot on. In fact, if I hover this over here, you can see the only thing that does change is my music volume. Everything else is left as default. We have the interface. There's going to be a couple of options in here that we need to go through. So, tips and tricks and show tutorial notifications. If you're new to this game, I really recommend you have both those on. You'll be surprised on what sort of tips and tricks pop up that you might not realize that you can do. Show turret radius when blueprinting. So this really applies if you're putting down sort of pillboxes and that sort of stuff as a blueprint. If you're not far enough into Factorio yet, you probably really doesn't matter to you, but it's one of those things I probably recommend you turn on for new players. It just shows sort of what your gun's going to cover, and really to keep the biters at bay, you want to make sure that one gun is covered by at least a friend, if not two friends. So if you have this option on, at least then when you're putting down blueprints, you can make sure your guns have friends covering their backs just in case. Item label in cursor just means if you're holding a belt or you're holding an inserter, it'll actually show it has a label, especially important when it comes to blueprints, because sometimes the blueprints, the little icons, they auto select, or even if you manually select them, sometimes they're far too similar to one another, so having that name is really, really helpful. Show rail block visualization should be on. Just if it's not on, turn it on. A lot of these settings are, well, there we go, will change back to default settings. So yeah, I've turned off tips and tricks. I've turned on tutorial notifications. Obviously, I've played this game quite a few times. Going through the game, through these, a lot of these should be left as default. I do recommend a couple of things with alt mode. So alt mode we'll cover in just a second, actually in game, but there is show inserter arrows in alt mode. And again, be a demonstration on the right hand side. It just shows which way an inserter is picking up and going to. For new players especially, I find this is a critical thing that they should be turning on. So I really recommend you turn this on, along with combinator settings. Combinator settings are one of those few things that doesn't really have a picture with alt mode on. Turn this on can make your life a little bit easier. Hopefully you don't have to open a combinator to see what's inside. It by just turning on this setting on. Technology screens opens when research is complete. This is what I really, really recommend you turn on. It means that when a research is complete, you're going to make sure that the technology window opens to make sure you keep progressing through the technology tree. It also means that it intentionally pauses the game right where you're up to, and you can have a moment to look through the tech tree. Picking a ghost item if no items are available. Again, this is up to each individual player. I actually have this on because I'm experienced in the game, and I know that if I don't have something in my inventory, I probably want to place down a ghost instead. Again, entirely up to each individual player. This one is entirely up to you. That's pretty much it for this menu. Like, a lot of these should be left as default. The only other thing I do want to show off is train visualization length. This comes back to the rail block visualization. It's something you're going to get to later in Factorio when you're actually playing with trains. And I'll probably have to drag that up because we're probably going to have to use the bottom of the screen to demonstrate this. But normally when you're putting down a train station, it'll automatically show you where the first 5 wagons are that connect into a train station. I actually slide this all the way up to 12. The reason I slide it all the way up to 12 is I want to be able to see potentially up to where 12 locomotives would go from a train station. I don't often build trains that long, but it really, really helps if I want to sort of scale things out properly. And it's literally a visualization option. It's only there if I'm holding a train station over a train track, or if I happen to be holding a train near that train station. So one of those little things are active quick bars and shortcut bar rows. Again, this is one of those things that I've had a lot of people question me about, and a lot of people have actually asked, is it a mod? No, it's a default vanilla part of Factorio. It's literally a setting in here. I normally have my quick bars set to 4 or 3, depending on the game. I just want to have more quick bars accessible quickly and easily throughout the duration of the game. Shortcut bars, I normally leave mine to 2, but you can set it up to 4 if you want to have, use less room on the right hand side because they're going to stack a little bit higher. But yeah, that's my default. Yeah, we're going to discard all our changes, so they changed them all back to what I'm used to, and we'll leave that there. The only thing you might want to turn on in here is you can actually have your blueprint library sync to the cloud and then sync back from the cloud. This is very, very important if you happen to be moving computer to computer. The catch is if you downgrade your Factorio, not saying you will, but it's something I want to make sure that you know about. If you downgrade your Factorio, it will delete your blueprint library. So something you need to keep in mind. In my case, mine's actually turned off because I upgrade and downgrade my Factorio all the time. In here is also where you'll find the single player autosave interval. Mine's set to 22 minutes. You can set it to 1 minute. You can set it to never. Again, entirely depends on you. I normally recommend about every 30 minutes. If you're newer to the game, maybe you want to set that more often. You can also come in here and delete all your achievements. If you're a glutton for punishment, you want to go and grab them all a second time. It also deletes all your Steam achievements. So, something to keep in mind. Oh, there is also upload crash logs. That is on by default. It's there. The Factorio devs anonymize the data before it goes up. It really, really helps them with working out bugs and that sort of stuff as they roll in. So again, mine's left on. I recommend you leave yours on, but it's entirely up to you. So we're going to discard all those changes. Mod settings. If you happen to have any mods installed, here is where you can come in and actually configure the particular mod settings. Some mods have settings, some don't. So with that out of the way, that covers a lot. That covers the basic menu, but there's one more trick I want to show you, and this is really for the more advanced players. So if we hold down Control, Shift, and Alt at the same time and click on Settings, we get a new menu down here called the Rest. So this is really for advanced players. There are a lot of options in here that can do really bad things to your game, but I'm going to show you some really important ones that really can speed up the booting of your game. So we're going to come down here and we're going to say cache prototype data. As you can see, there's a little information tag on top of it. And basically means if you close Factorio and reopen Factorio without changing any mods, which is what most players don't do. They don't change their mods every single time they close and reopen the game. It means that very, very first loading stage, it'll actually pre-cache that data and just go, oh, nothing's changed. I'll just read the same data rather than reading the previous data that's cached rather than reprocessing everything. It can vastly increase the speed of which Factorio boots. Really, really, really comes down important if you happen to have a lot of mods. Factorio can take up to 5 minutes to load if you have a lot of mods. I'm sure anybody who's played something like Minecraft that's been heavily modded, you open the game, you go away, you get a cup of coffee and come back. This caches all that data, so it means your Factorio should open rather than 5 minutes, like 15 seconds. So can make a massive, massive difference. The other thing we're going to turn on is a second caching option, which comes down to your graphics card. I got to find it. Actually, I don't have to find it. We have a search button here. Here we go. So under graphics settings, you have a cache sprite atlas. So each time you open Factorio, it goes through and it makes or decompresses all the graphics that you might use when when loading up Factorio, along with any mods, etc. What you can actually do is you can cache those items. So as long as you don't change the mods, same story, it'll actually cache that data to open Factorio again, second time, third time, fourth time, much, much faster because it's already processed the data once and then saved it rather than, having to reprocess it every single time you open Factorio. This particular setting normally adds about 3 or 4 gigabytes to the size of your Factorio save. You can compress that down by ticking on the second option, which will slightly slow down the speed at which Factorio loads, but still going to be much faster than having it open by default. So these are a couple of settings you can turn on. Again, each one of these means not this time, but next time it'll actually cache the data. Time after that, when you open Factorio again, it's going to load much, much faster. So these are different options you can turn on to really speed up your Factorio game loading. So As said, that's under the rest menu. There are a lot of other options in here you can have a look through. And again, like there is information tags for a lot of these. There is an option here, non-blocking saves. Basically means rather than the game pausing to save, it just duplicates everything and saves it in the background. Only works on Linux and Mac OS, and even then it is experimental. That's one of the things in here. Big warning tag, don't change this if you don't know what you're doing, because these don't really get tested. They are very, very, very experimental. So we're going to confirm that, and last thing we're going to do is we're going to jump migrate factory, and I'm going to show you the all-important F4 menu. So if you press F4 in the game, you can have a couple of options down here, and as you can see, I have some turned on already. So I have show FPS up here in the top right hand corner. So if I turn this on, it's always going to be visible. And my FPS and my UPS, obviously FPS is frames per second, UPS is updates per second. So again, a lot of people probably remember it from the Minecraft days that Minecraft just ran at 20 updates per second. Factorio actually defaults to 60 updates per second, but it means if your updates per second, your UPS, this second number here starts to fall, it means normally you've built a factory that's too big for your poor computer to handle. So something you need to keep in mind, a lot of YouTubers, streamers, those sorts of people have these numbers on the screen at all times so they can see and you can see very, very quickly if they're sort of starting to push their computer to the limits. On top of that, we have a lot more information here. These are all debug options. You can't really hurt your game for turning these on, even though this is a bright red message that really puts the fear of God into you. But look, there are a lot of settings in here you can see. So you can see, like, you know, I've got 29 megabytes worth of sound files and 22 megabytes worth of more sample files. So there are options in here, along with, you know, where my cursor is on the map according to X and Y. So from my starting position out. Time usage, so how much of my CPU is being spent in the update cycle. At the moment, it's 0.1 milliseconds. When you get up to 16.6, this is when your FPS and UPS will start dropping. So, you know, if you're looking for what's my game doing, you can see in here that this is what my CPU is spending all its time on. I'm going to cover a lot of these more in depth in another video. Again, down the description you will find a playlist which is going to have a lot of these tips and tricks and videos in them. But yeah, in here you can see a lot more advanced settings. So the only other ones I really want to show off is show multiplayer waiting icon. This won't really apply to me right now because I am in a single player server, but up here you'll have underneath the frames per second and the updates per second, you'll have a little icon if you're actually waiting on a multiplayer server to communicate back with you. Along with these show multiplayer statistics will also be up there. If you haven't been on a multiplayer game, you can see basically what your ping time is at all times to the multiplayer server. The only other things I probably want to show off are two I have on by default. So show logistics robots on map. So if I was to go to map view and I had logistics robots rolling around, energetic, and I put in a nice overlay right now, you'd see like little squares representing the bots flying around the map doing different things, along with show recipe icons on map. This is one I actually turn on by default nowadays, and it just means that when I'm zoomed in on a factory, I can actually see the recipe of every single item or every single assembler on map view by just looking at the icons on map view. Again, we should have a good example on the screen for you, which is probably a lot better than me trying to describe what it actually is that you should be seeing. So that's really the only ones I have on by default. There are lots of debug options in here. Again, most of these you can turn on without any worry to your game. They can get a little bit horrible. If you want to turn on a few of these too many, you know. It just gets a little bit ridiculous and clogs up your screen. But yes, there are lots of options here in the debug menu you can turn on. This is the F4 menu. The F4 menu is on at all times. There is also an F5 menu that turns on the debug version, which is this here, which has so many of these turned on. You can always turn off everything you don't want. Hang on. We'll get rid of some of these. There we go. So if I turn that off in the F4 menu, I can always turn on the F5 menu to toggle things on and off. So if you don't want this up here all the time, you can go into F4 or F4 to bring up this menu and turn on the different options you want to see, and they're in the debug option. If you turn them on the debug option, then you only see them when you press the F5 sound. So let's just, as example, press F5, we get this up in the top right hand corner, which is our frames per second and our updates per second. I press F5 again, it disappears. Anyway, with that said, I'm going to leave the video here. As always, if you have more questions, you have anything that you want to ask, by all means, jump on our Discord. We have a lot of very, very experienced Discord Factorio players on our Discord. More than happy to help you out with any questions or concerns you might have. As always, link for that's down in the description, along with link to the playlist for this current series being an introduction to Factorio, along with some other tips and tricks videos that I've done in the past for, you know, still relevant, but older versions of Factorio. With all that said, thank you guys so much for watching. Do hope you've enjoyed, and I'll see you guys in the next video. All right, bye.